What does it mean to show up as authentic, real you? And why is it so scary and confusing at times? Watch this video and find out. Well, the real you really means you that is internally in alignment with the bigger you or the higher self and your soul. When we are able to vibrate in conscious alignment with the bigger part of ourselves and then show that to the world, that's what generally from the spiritual perspective means being authentically yourself in the world. It is not about showing whatever you're feeling in that moment. That is actually irresponsible quite often. So what I run into is that a lot of times you guys ask me questions like, well, I showed my real emotion, I was upset, and I showed how upset I was, and then the person just got mad at me and said that, you know, I ruined their good time because I was upset. Well, first of all, yeah, you probably ruined their good time. And second, what was the actual expression coming from? Not the authentic self. The expression was coming from the lower self. And this is what quite often is mistaken for this concept of, well, I'm truly expressing myself. See, I'm showing you what I'm really feeling. Yeah, but which part of you is feeling that? If the part that's feeling it is the lower self, it is completely irresponsible to express that directly out into the world. If something, it would actually get you karma if you don't process that. Because we generate the lesson, then we don't learn the lesson, so we keep recreating the lesson again and again. So if, let's say, somebody is really upset because they're angry at somebody because they're competing with that person, and then they decide at some point to show their feelings, and they just go, you know, I'm so mad, and you hurt me, you did this, and I can't believe you won and I didn't, and I just like hate you for it. Okay, well, that's a lower self speaking, right? That is not beneficial. That is not self-expression that's authentic. That is expressing lower self irresponsibly. Because what that person essentially is doing is giving himself or herself a license to be a child. That's just throwing a tantrum publicly and calling it a authentic expression. Truly authentic expression is from the higher self. That does not mean that we cannot express what we are feeling when we're feeling it, but we have to do it from the perspective of the inner grown-up instead of the inner child. So how would that look like? Let's say in the same example, the person could have said, what you just told me made me feel angry, and I notice I want to blame you. I want to make you wrong and me right. I'm going to look into that, but right now I'm very upset and I don't feel like continue talking with you, so I think we need to end this conversation. Now that would have been much more of a true authentic self-expression, right? Because the person took responsibility for what they were feeling. They did name it, you know, to another person, but they did not blast the other person with whatever it is they were feeling. They contained it, they owned it, and then they spoke from the higher self part of them out. This is how we can explain anything that we're feeling, including the worst possible feelings of whatever we're afraid of in our lower self, to the world. All we're going to do is own them, be responsible, and deliver them more like you're talking about your internal experience instead of blasting out directly your internal experience. That is irresponsible. So when two people are talking, and let's say once one of them said something and another one had her feelings hurt, if she starts crying and then saying, oh, I just can't believe you said that, that is so horrible, and it just makes me feel so bad because you're just being so mean. Now, that's a lower self throwing a tantrum. That person is feeling sad, bad, hurt, whatever, because of her perceptual filter. But choosing to put all that onto another person, in other words, make the trigger sort of responsible for her experience. And it is never that, ever. We are always creators of our own experience. Some triggers are worse than others, but they still only that trigger. So if we want to evolve to the next level of ourselves, we have to own whatever our internal climate is. We have to own our own internal workings. When our lower self ends up being upset or hurt, we have to be aware of that and have enough of the grown-up part of us to take care of us. Then you can report it to the outside world. So essentially, authentic self-expression when it comes to lower emotions is a report. It is not a direct expression, it's a report of what is going on inside. And it is beneficial sometimes because another person might not know, let's say, that you're hurt. If they're not sensitive, they might not realize, or maybe you're very good at hiding it. You know, there's some people that are so good at hiding that they're hurting that, you know, unless somebody is psychic or sensitive emotionally, they might not know. So for those people, it is actually a very good idea to say to whoever they're talking to that right now my feelings are really hurt. I'm processing a lot of pain right now. What you're saying is just resonating inside as something that I just keep getting hurt from your words. That's okay to say because that's a report. But then that person can say, oh, and you're hurting me. It's what you are saying produces hurt inside my world. And now I am going to figure out what is that about. A lot of times when somebody says something and we feel hurt, it's not because they're hurting us in any way whatsoever, especially if they didn't have intention to hurt us, like there was no negative intent, they're not blasting us with energy. Then it's our filters that make it translate as a hurt, as an insult, as something that we have to get offended, about. But it's all internal. If we own everything within our systems, if we're highly sort of masterful in understanding our inner workings, pain can still happen, negative emotions can still happen, but we don't feel like we are somehow bombarded by this negative stimuli from the outside. We understand that that stimuli is simply showing us the areas we still need to work on. So then every trigger, no matter how negative, becomes a tool, something that we can actually be grateful for because, hey, universe just showed us something that is, unfinished within us, that's not sitting quite right, that we have to deal with. And the more that happens and we actually deal with it, the less it's gonna happen. What usually happens, though, is that the person does not deal with whatever got triggered. They got upset, they took that as an offense or as a hurt or as an insult, and then they stewing in this thing that the lower self is hurt, and then the ego is picking it up and saying, well, I'm right, they wrong, I'm right, they wrong, I'm in the right here. And then this negative righteousness happens, and then it's so hard to let it go because it's addictive. Negative righteousness is like a drug. It feels so good to be right and make them wrong. But then what did we learn? Absolutely nothing, right? Which means this will happen again because we just set in motion a lesson and yet we have not chose to finish it. And we create our reality by putting those lessons on our path so that we can learn. So when we get those lessons and then we choose not to learn because we get too addicted to the high of being right, then the lessons just keep repeating. That's how karma happens. That's why we carry over from one lifetime to the next lifetime on and on and on the same stuff. That's where it comes from. So if we want to stop carrying over karmic patterns from lifetime to lifetime, we have to change how we interact with the lessons that we have created. And one of the main sort of pieces of that puzzle is be responsible for your authentic self-expression, so that whatever part you're expressing is the higher self personality component, not the lower self. The lower self can still be there, we all have one, and we do have the right to name what it's feeling, what it's experiencing to another person if the other person is the trigger. But make sure that you do it in the form of a report so that you own that that person is just a trigger. And then you still have to deal with what's the lesson. Why did I get so upset about it? Why did this offend me? Offense usually means that you have some belief system about it and the other person has a different belief system and you so believe that your system is right and theirs is wrong that when they choose to see you inside their belief system, that feels like a total insult. And then a person can take an offense to that. But if we remember that everybody's belief systems are their own, and that we all have free will and we all allowed to have whatever belief systems we have, that means they can have their perceptual filter, you can have your perceptual filter. And just because they see you this way and you see yourself differently, it doesn't mean anything other than just that, different perceptual filter. Then you can make a decision of not interact with this person, or to choose to have more explanation as to maybe this person didn't have enough information why they placed you in a different category. But you can choose not to talk about it, or you can choose to talk about it. But to be offended implies there's some negative righteousness in there. And that is our responsibility to deal with, so that we don't create more karmic patterns. So, hopefully this clarifies to you about authentic self-expression. Be love. Be free. Be God.